In the summer of 1994, Connie and I and Kristen moved to Amman, Jordan. Connie and I were studying Arabic there, a 2-year course at the Premier Language Learning Center in the Middle East. And Kristen was in grades 4 and 5. So there we were, the three of us, Catherine off in college, Karen off in college, and we had a really, really good 2 years there. A lot of really good students that we met that are all over the world in ministry. Especially got close to a brother named Daryl, who is now pastoring in the States, but especially close to him, I think, of all those that were there. And he really kind of became part of our family, and love that brother. And he was a part of the strength, along with a handful of others, to us while we were there, especially missing our older girls. So we, in the course of time, we were able to get over to Israel, and met with some folks there. There's a guy that I'd known who, since we were in high school, back in the States, his family came to my dad's church in Los Angeles, California. And he was pastoring a church there in Jerusalem, and had a ministry there. And beyond that, in terms of he could actually get visas for people to be able to live and work inside Israel. In any event, we were on one of those trips coming back, and the way it worked then, we had to go through this particular border crossing. And when you were taken or got to the border on the Israeli side, we're going back to Jordan, they would collect everybody's passports, put you on a bus, and then take you to kind of a no man's land in between. And there was an office there, and you would park there, you go inside and wait, kind of like a waiting room for a bus stop or something. Kind of was. And then they would process your passports and then give them back to you to call you up by name. They had them already when you got there. So they they called us up, Connie and Chris and myself, and the guy was a woman officer who gave Connie her passport, gave Kristen her passport, and then reached out with mine. But when she did, she held on to it. So we're standing there, and she's got a hold of. She wasn't letting go. So there we were, and she said to me, she asked the question, "It's a talib. You're a student?" And okay, I was 45, and that raised questions, didn't it? "It's a talib." And then she asked me, like the second time, when she did ask me the second time, she looked back over her shoulder. There's an office in the back, and that's where, if they had a problem with you or your passport, that's where you talk to somebody. And I knew enough that, I didn't want to go back there. And that could have led to something a little more difficult than just having myself question whether or not I was a student. So she said, "And the talib," I said, and then I said to her, there's two ways to say "I understand" in Arabic. It's the same in English. You can say "I understand," or you can say "understood." And those have different nuances, don't they? So she said, "At the talib, your student?" And I said, finally, on the second or third time, I said, "Ana fahimt." I understood. I didn't say "Ana fahim," I understand. I said "Ana fahimt." And that means I got your meaning beyond the words of the question. I understand what you're after here. So we talked about it on the way back, and I began to pray. And before too long, I was asking the Lord, well, I tell people I'm studying Arabic, and I was. It's not dishonest, but it didn't tell the whole story, and it didn't really satisfy people in terms of what's a guy my age studying Arabic, in the maybe he's going to go to business or whatever. I don't know what they thought, but it was pretty obvious that I couldn't be there much longer with that kind of a tag on me. So I was praying, and I felt like the Lord just say, "Tell them you're a pastor." When somebody asks who you are, what you do, just tell them you're a pastor. And I can remember thinking, well, it's easy for you to say, but pastors don't do well here. Missionaries, pastors don't do well here. There was no, tell him you're a pastor. And I said, okay. So I obeyed the Lord. And I would tell them, I'm a qasis. So I'm no longer telling them I'm a talib, I'm a qasis. I'm a pastor. And it was amazing what happened. They asked me, look, where's your church? I said, well, I'm a part of the international church. Kanisa Dalea. I said, oh, okay. And I'm studying Arabic because we want to work in this part of the world. And so they would, okay, that was acceptable. For most people. It was interesting because there were some in the neighborhood, places where we dealt with, like the bakery, which was a favorite place for especially Chris and I to go together. A little father-daughter outing up the street to the bakery, which was next to the bank, so it was all kind of convenient. And anyway, they just shut me down. They just didn't like that at all, and that's part of it because of where they were from, but nevertheless, that kind of stops the relationship there, it seemed. But others liked it. They said, oh, and part of the reason they liked it is because it made sense for my age and my appearance and all that. And even if they didn't understand totally or weren't curious to ask. But one day I was out on the street walking probably to the bakery, and this guy came up to me and said, he said, hi, my name is so-and-so. He said, you're a pastor. And I said, yes. I thought, well, so far so good, but it's only been a couple of months. He said, oh, great. He said, I've really wanted to talk to an expert. He said, I don't want to just talk to anybody. I wanted to talk to somebody who had studied and this was what they did with their life and their job or their career or whatever. He said, I need to talk to somebody. I want to talk about Christ. I want to talk about Christianity. So we had a good talk. Now, I didn't see that guy much, and I don't know whatever happened to him, but I answered his questions, and they were pretty specific, and it was enough to lead him on to accepting Christ, if that was the path that he was actually on. I prayed then and that it would be. In any event, so I got switched from a talib to a qasis, from a student to a pastor by the Lord's design. And it became a real blessing. And later, when I got comfortable doing that, and later when we moved to Egypt and just in general with people, it's like that was a real blessing. And it actually turned out to be an open door. And I thought that was kind of interesting as I went on, because I want to pastor an international church in Alexandria, Egypt. And then later I was pastoring an international church in Ankara, Turkey. And so to say that I was a pastor, then I could tell them, yeah, pastor of an international church. And it was really interesting because, you have to have a reason to be in these cultures, these societies that they accept. And I found that by switching from from a student to a pastor, that I actually, as an international pastor, that was my ticket to stay there. So that was kind of cool. So there you have it. I'm grateful to the Lord for that. Now, toward the end of that time, we were actually offered a visa slot through my friend over in Jerusalem. And so for the next 3 years of our assignment with our denominational missionary effort, we moved to the other side of the Jordan River and lived in Israel for a year in Jerusalem, and then for 2 years in a place called Mevaset Zion. We were in Mevaset Zion. Then we moved for 2 years up to a place called Herzliya Putua. We'll talk about that in a coming video. But I just wouldn't have thought coming in, if I told him I was a pastor, that was going to turn out to be good. And it did. But then again, isn't that the way it is when you obey the Lord?